Hello and welcome to the Abingdon Air and Country Show, the opening event for the 2019 European Airshow season. On Sunday the 5th of May, Dalton Barracks hosted almost 10,000 people for the 20th edition of the Abingdon Air and Country Show and the final iteration of the event in its current format. And there can be little doubt that the flying display element went out with a bang, with a varied lineup of aircraft, many of which are rarely seen on the airshow circuit. So let's take a look now at the running order. Our review begins with Rich Goodwin's Pitts S2S, then 8 minutes in we've got Chris Burkitt and the Little and Large Extra Duo, the first civilian-operated four-ship display from the historic Army aircraft flight, the first Tucano display in several years, and a fantastic performance by the P-47 in a quarter of an hour is also among the highlights of the programme. As I mentioned, the 2019 Abingdon Air and Country Show marks the end of an era as rising costs, increasing regulation and new insurance rules force the organisers to drop the flying display. Aviation will still feature in future events though, with a fly-in, pleasure flights and flypasts.
And of course, our thanks go to the members of the British Army stationed here at Dalton Barracks, who assist in the staging of this event on their territory.
As the smoke goes on, this is Rich Goodwin with his muscle biplane.
The flying display begins with an Abingdon favourite, Richard Goodwin. The display starts with a throwback to last year's show when Rich performed a very popular display with a car, and the act returns once again, starting with a formation pass down the runway.
The aircraft always occupying the western side of the runway with the car on this side. But here he is coming in for his solo display.
This aircraft has been highly modified, fitted with a very powerful 8.5 litre 300 horsepower engine and larger control surfaces which make it extremely manoeuvrable. It can pull up to +6 or -5 G and has a top speed of 200 miles per hour. And there he is using that enormous power and state-of-the-art propeller to hang the aircraft on its prop. Rich had 2 pits at the show. His second aircraft was on static display, having just been cleared for flight. It will in time be fitted with a pair of jet engines, but for the time being it hasn't had those fitted yet as the aircraft undergoes its initial flight testing. The jet pits will have redesigned wings and control surfaces, a 300 horsepower Lycoming IO 540 piston engine and 2 Lynx jet engines, which will combined give the aircraft a power to weight ratio of greater than 1:1. Aside from being a prolific airshow pilot, Rich flew the Tornado GR1 with the Royal Air Force, including on operations in the First Gulf War, before becoming an airline pilot in 1993. Next up is a 2-ship display by the Gazelle Squadron, one of the foremost operators of Westland Gazelles in the UK. In the lead is a Gazelle HT3 called Ginger, which served with the Royal Air Force before being purchased by a civilian company in 2002. Ginger changed hands a few more times in the following decade and is now one of the squadron's primary display aircraft, wearing the colour scheme of No. 2 Flight Training School. The second aircraft is Gazelle HT2 Gordon, which served with 705 Naval Air Squadron, as you can see from its markings. This particular aircraft has airshow pedigree, though. It actually participated in the 1978 World Helicopter Championships in the Soviet Union as part of the UK's tri-service helicopter team. Today, the Army Air Corps is the only branch of the UK Armed Forces still flying the Gazelle, making it the oldest helicopter in British military service. Now here comes something rather novel, as Mike Williams carries his 40% scale Extra 300 out towards the runway. And now, rolling for takeoff, is Chris Burkett in his full-size Extra, together forming the Little and Large Extra duo. Pulling up straight into a stall turn to begin this remarkable and highly original display, quite probably the first and only airshow act in the UK to combine a model and a real aeroplane. In this display, the pilots are really using perspective to make the aeroplanes look much closer together than they really are. The full-size Extra is about 3 times further away from the crowd than the model. Chris Burkett entered the airshow world through Captain Neville's Flying Circus before progressing to the Pit Special and taking up competition aerobatics in 2006. He then transitioned to the Extra 300S, which he flies both in the Little and Large Extra duo and the Global Stars aerobatic team, with whom he's performed as far afield as China and Bahrain.
That display act first appeared on the British scene, I think it's just as amazing now as it was then. Absolutely brilliant flying, and do show your appreciation to Mike Williams and to Chris Burkett in the Little and Large Extras.
The Fairchild Argus next, a rare airshow performer which first flew in 1932. This aircraft is remarkably successful for a child of the Great Depression, and became quite popular as a personal transport aircraft, with over 2,000 examples being built. The aircraft was also used by the British and American armed forces, among several others, and in the hands of the Civil Air Patrol, the type even engaged in successful anti-submarine warfare at the start of the Second World War.
Two Oscars, aren't
So here it is, on the roll, the North American NA64 Yale.
And now the flying display debut of this Duxford-based NA64 Yale. And if you think this aeroplane looks familiar, you might be right, as the NA64 is the predecessor of the T6 Texan, Harvard and SNJ family. Of the 30 or so Yales that have survived to the present day, virtually all owe their existence to a single farmer who purchased the aircraft in bulk when they were retired from the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1946. Four aircraft now take to the runway ahead of the first ever four-ship civilian-operated display from the historic Army aircraft flight. The team was formed in 1980 and has been partially supported by the Ministry of Defence until funding was cut in 2013. To save the fleet, four aircraft were transferred to the Civil Register, and the team is now entirely self-funded, relying on public support, sponsors and donations. Here, the Oster AOP Mark IX demonstrates its excellent turn radius, which made it so well suited to its observation role. And here is the Westland Scout, one of the few all-British-designed helicopters to see significant export success, with more than 150 airframes built and service with 5 nations. Leading the formation here, you see a de Havilland Beaver AL Mark I used by the Army Air Corps on reconnaissance missions. And the final aircraft in the display, second from the back, is the Augusta Bell's Sioux AH Mark I, a general-purpose and observation platform of which more than 2,000 were built, serving with some 35 nations as diverse as Zimbabwe, Indonesia, Japan and Australia. Taking off now, the display debut of the resurrected Royal Air Force short Tucano T1 solo display of 72 Squadron at Linton-on-Ouse.
Boys and girls, the 2019 Royal Air Force Tucano display team.
This display team hasn't performed since 2014 and was reformed for this year's season ahead of the Tucano's retirement at the end of the year. A nodding stall turn there, flown by 24-year-old display pilot Flight Lieutenant Liam Matthews, a Royal Air Force flight instructor who himself only completed training 2 years ago. The short Tucano is the UK licence-built version of the Embraer 312 Tucano, and it serves with the Royal Air Force as well as the air arms of Kenya and Kuwait. 160 airframes have been built between 1986 and 1995. And now a hanging stall turn, followed next by a topside pass to end the display.
Gentlemen, boys and girls, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today, and I hope you've enjoyed watching the display as much as Liam has enjoyed flying it for you.
We turn next to one of the finest displays of the day, Richard Grace flying P-47D Thunderbolt Nellie.
That from the P-47, which will be our next display item.
Richard Grace grew up around vintage aircraft, his family owning a Spitfire when he was a child, and he has been flying warbirds for many years. He also displayed as part of the Trig team until the team was disbanded last year to allow Richard to focus more on his warbird flying. This year, Richard and the P-47 will be part of an all-new formation team, Ultimate Fighters, which will perform 4-ship aerobatic displays with the Thunderbolt, Mustang, Spitfire and Bouchon. And the final World War II fighter in our programme is P-51D Mustang, Miss Helen. With some truly excellent displays and a varied flying lineup, the Abingdon Air and Country Show certainly ended its Airshow days on a high. We'll conclude our programme now with the Aero Superbatics Wingwalkers displaying in the darkening afternoon sky. Next time, we're at the Barksdale Defenders of Liberty Airshow in the USA. But until then, from me, Adam Landau, it's goodbye for now.